My family turned on me over gifts. I refused to be their ATM anymore. I was looking forward to Christmas that year. For once, everything was planned out ahead of time. By the first week of December, I'd already bought presents for everyone. My parents, my brother Jacob, his wife Kelly, and their kids. I even bought extra gifts, just in case there were unexpected guests. Something about this year felt different, like it was going to be special. When Christmas Eve finally arrived, I packed all the presents into my car and drove to my parents' house. I was excited, thinking about the smiles on my nephews' faces when they unwrapped their gifts. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, everything changed. I knocked on the door, balancing bags of gifts in each hand. My mom opened it, but instead of the warm welcome I expected, she looked uncomfortable. Before I could say anything, she spoke. "We don't want you here this year." I blinked, confused. "What? Is this some kind of joke?" Jacob's voice cut through from behind her, smug and cold. "This is no place for losers." Losers? I stood there, stunned, trying to process what was happening. My dad was in the background, avoiding eye contact, while my mom looked as if she wished she were anywhere else. Jacob, on the other hand, looked pleased with himself, as if he had been waiting for this moment. I felt a wave of emotions, confusion, anger, embarrassment, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Fine," I said quietly, "if that's how you feel." I turned around, walked back to my car, and placed the bags of gifts on the passenger seat. Sitting in the driver's seat, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to make sense of what had just happened. No place for losers. Tired of me? Where was this coming from? After a few minutes of sitting in the car, I decided I needed answers. Leaving the presents behind, I marched back to the front door. My parents were still standing there, whispering to each other. Jacob was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. I didn't bother knocking. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping inside. "Why am I not welcome at Christmas? What did I do?" Jacob didn't even look up from his phone. "You've been slacking off lately. The kids barely got anything from you this year." I stared at him, stunned. "Are you serious? I spent hundreds on presents for your kids. They have more gifts in the car than anyone else." He finally looked up, smirking. "Last year, you did more. This year, it's like you don't care. It's embarrassing for us." I turned to my parents, expecting them to say something, to defend me or at least tell Jacob he was out of line. Instead, my mom gave me an awkward smile. "But you just bought a new car," she said. "You found money for that." For a moment, I didn't even know how to respond. "The car is on credit," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And even if it wasn't, how does buying a car make me responsible for Jacob's kids? They're not my responsibility." Jacob leaned back, looking smug. "You make the most money. Families help each other. You've always done that." I looked at Kelly, who was sitting quietly in the corner. She hadn't said a word, but her face was flushed, and she was staring down at her hands, looking like she wanted to disappear. "Is that your reasoning?" I asked Jacob. "Because I've been generous in the past, I'm now obligated to do so forever. And if I don't, I'm a loser?" Jacob shrugged. "If the shoe fits." That was it for me. I took a step back and shook my head. "You know what? You're right. I don't belong here. Enjoy your Christmas." I turned to Jacob. "Good luck with those presents, because this loser is done financing your life." Without waiting for a response, I walked out. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel harder than I needed to. I couldn't wrap my head around what had just happened. Had I really been treated like this because I didn't do enough? After everything I'd done for Jacob and his family over the years? When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at nothing. The bags of presents were still in the car, and the sight of them made me feel sick. I had spent weeks picking out the perfect gifts, thinking about what the kids would love, and what my parents would appreciate. And for what? To be told I didn't belong. The more I thought about it, the clearer things became. This wasn't just about Christmas or presents. This had been building for years, and I had been too blind or too willing to see it. The truth was, I had always been the one Jacob leaned on. When he and Kelly first got married and struggled financially, I stepped in to help. A couple hundred here, a couple hundred there. I helped with rent when they were facing eviction, and later with daycare when their second child was born. At first, it felt good to help. I cared about his kids and didn't want to see them struggle. But over time, what started as generosity turned into expectation. Jacob stopped asking politely and started demanding. And somewhere along the way, I became an ATM instead of a brother. This Christmas was the breaking point. The next morning, I woke up with a clearer head. I made a decision. I was done. No more bailing Jacob out. No more endless gifts to make up for his lack of effort. If he wanted his kids to have the things I provided, he could figure it out himself. It wasn't an easy decision. Cutting off Jacob didn't just mean cutting off financial support. It meant risking my relationship with him, his children, and even my parents. But I couldn't keep being treated like this. I didn't reach out to anyone, and they didn't reach out to me. I thought maybe they got the message, but I should have known Jacob wouldn't let it go that easily. The silence stretched through New Year's Eve. No phone calls, no texts, nothing. For the first time in years, I spent the holidays completely alone. I won't lie, part of me wanted to call, but every time I picked up the phone, I remembered Jacob's smirk and his words, "No place for losers." By mid-January, things started to change. One night, I got a text from Kelly. It was short and to the point. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't agree with what happened. Jacob won't hear it from me, but I thought you should know." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. On one hand, it felt good to know that someone in the family saw things for what they were. On the other hand, Kelly had stayed silent that night when it mattered most. Her apology now felt like too little, too late. I finally replied, "I appreciate it, Kelly, but this isn't something I can just move on from." She didn't push the conversation further, and that was fine with me. In early February, Jacob showed up at my house unannounced. I was in the middle of a work meeting when I heard the knock on the door. At first, I ignored it, but the knocking didn't stop. When I finally opened the door, there he was, disheveled and frustrated. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside before I could stop him. I crossed my arms. "What's this about? You need to stop acting like this and start helping out again." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he meant it. "Helping out? You mean paying for your life? I told you I'm done." He glared at me. "You're the one with the money. Do you know how hard it's been for us since you decided to act like this? The kids barely have what they need. Kelly's trying to keep it together, but we can't do it without your help." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you listening to yourself right now? You're a grown man, Jacob. You have a wife and children. If you need more money, go out and earn it. It's not my job to solve your problems." "You've always helped before," he shot back. "Why are you being so selfish now?" I stared at him, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. "Selfish? You mean not allowing myself to be used anymore? That's not selfish, Jacob. It's self-respect. You should try it sometime." Jacob's expression darkened, but I could see something else beneath his frustration, fear. He was desperate, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. I sighed, trying to find the right words. "I get it, Jacob. Life's tough. But you need to take responsibility for your family. I'm not your safety net anymore. You need to stand on your own." For a moment, he said nothing, just stood there, fists clenched at his sides. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. As I watched him leave, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't the end of the story, far from it, but it was a beginning of setting boundaries, of standing up for myself, and of finally letting go of the weight I had carried for far too long.